Thank you for listening to the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast with hosts Clara and Jimmy Hinton. If you're new to the podcast, please look us up on your favorite podcast app, subscribe, like, and share so that you never miss an episode. If you'd like to further support us, visit patreon.com/speakingout and check out the different rewards. You'll find exclusive rewards if you sign up as a patron of the podcast. Thank you for your support, and let's get into the show. Welcome to this week's episode. Thank you again to our patrons who make this podcast possible. Thank you to all of our different tiers.
Yes.
Our favorite tier, I think, is probably the book club. We do a monthly Zoom with our patrons, and we talk about chapters that are found in my book, and we have some really, really good questions that are pre-submitted. So if
really
you want
deep
to,
discussions.
really good. And the great thing about being a patron is that all of those past episodes are replayable. So even if you jump in later, you're not going to miss anything.
That's
you can
pretty
go back
awesome.
and you can
That's
watch.
great.
So
Yes.
anyway, thank you guys for making it possible. So this week, my goodness, is there news everywhere. So today we're going to talk about the Southern Baptists refused to act on abuse despite secret list of pastors. This is a Christianity Today article. This is all over national news. This is huge news right now.
Huge news. Jolting to some, not so jolting to others.
Well, that's what we were just saying. Before we recorded, we said this isn't surprising in the least.
No.
This is, I mean, Krista Brown, I got to give her a shout out right now. And not just her. I mean, there's so many people, but she is kind of what I consider the pioneer of creating databases and coming up with the idea and actually acting on it. Having a running list of abusive pastors in the SBC.
Right.
And, of course, Megan and Dominic Benninger picked up that baton, and they kept that going. They have a very effective database. But it turns out, in this report, after an investigation, turns out the Southern Baptist had a database of their own. They just kept it secret.
Interesting, isn't it?
Which is so ironic because
Yeah.
what they've been telling Krista Brown from the beginning and this whole caring well sham that happened, their whole thing was, well, my goodness, we're independent churches and there's no way that we could manage a database. It's just we can't update it. We can't impose it. The churches are they're autonomous and we can't vote on a database, and there's no way we could manage it. Well, interesting, because they had their own database.
They did have their own database.
Of over 700.
Yeah. The numbers are astronomical, number one. Number two, blatant lies were told about not being able to keep a database. Number three, this hidden secret, which is now exposed, is worse than we imagined, any of us. Number four, so many actions of abuse have taken place because of the secrecy of this.
Well, and I think Krista had a great point, and I want to read a quote of hers in this article. I thought it was just phenomenal. So she said, how many kids and congregants could have been spared horrific harm if only the executive committee had taken action back in, listen to this, back in 2006, when I first wrote to them, urging specific concrete steps. And how many survivors could have been spared the re-traumatizing hell of trying to report clergy sex abuse into a system that consistently turns its back, asked Brown in a 2021 letter. The quote goes on, the SBC Executive Committee's long-standing resistance to abuse reforms has now yielded a whole new crop of clergy sex abuse victims and of survivors re-traumatized in their efforts to report. That she wrote that back in 2021, and now here we are.
It is sickening.
And how many more were
It's sickening.
victimized
It's
just in the
sickening,
past
isn't it?
year?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh,
And that was the
yeah.
problem that I had from the very beginning. And I was one of the only few that I know of from the very beginning. I know Ashley Easter was pretty vocal, but about J.D. Greer and how he was getting all this praise, and he named by name these 10 churches, and got all this flack. These 10 churches that had abusive pastors in the past, and they were going to look at removing them from the SBC, and people were praising him up and down. And I was like, this is all smoke and mirrors. And then there was the whole Caring Well thing. That whole initiative was so bogus
It's a joke. It
because
was a joke. I'll
people
call it a
people
joke.
were hopeful,
Yeah.
and they were like, finally the SBC they've seen the light of day. There was this this bombshell article that came out. I think Houston Chronicle was the one that published that first initial report. And so they said, this is like a come to Jesus moment. They've come to a moment of reckoning. No, they haven't. And here's the point that I'm going to make right now. They've had chance after chance after
right.
chance after chance after chance to change the culture. And this bombshell, this is the biggest bombshell yet, by far.
This is a big one. This is
And
a
the most
biggie.
costly. This was a $4 million. They're $4 million in right now. And I think this is going to open up a
It'll be a lot
sea
deeper than 4 million.
lawsuits.
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure.
And
and it
it-
should.
and
by
it
the
should.
way. And it should.
So, if anybody is holding out hope that this is going to shift the culture, that this is going to be a come to Jesus moment with among the leadership in the SBC, it's not. I promise you, it's not. I hate to burst your bubble, but this will not change the culture within the SBC.
Explain that, Jimmy. I mean, right now the cage is being rattled.
It is,
It's being
but-
rattled hard.
But what they're going to
And-
do is what they did in the past. They're going to do damage control. They just
Exactly.
had a meeting today, this morning, and this is an article by Rob Downen, Houston Chronicle. He just published it today. Yep, today's the 24th. The title is Southern Baptist Leaders to Release Private Database on Sex Abuse, Revoke Ex-Leaders' Benefits. So the ex-leader is Augie Bodo. Augie Bodo is, my goodness, that man is a work of art. They published some of his private emails in this article that I'm going to link to. And he's calling abuse survivors, basically, they're like the spawn of Satan.
Worthless. Yeah.
They're stirring things up. If they're looking for abuse, well, they found it. They're just. Here we go. Here's the quote. Bodo saw the devil at work in their efforts. That is, abuse survivors. In an email obtained by Guidepost, he wrote, "This whole thing should be seen for what it is. It is a satanic scheme to completely distract us from evangelism. It is not the gospel. It is not even part of the gospel. It's a misdirection play. Yes, Krista Brown and Rachel Denhollander have succumbed to an availability heuristic because of their victimizations. They've gone to the SBC looking for sexual abuse, and of course, they found it. Their outcries have certainly caused an availability cascade, but they are not to blame. This is the devil being temporarily successful."
I don't
mean,
know
this guy's
how,
a joke.
I don't know how someone can say that. And when I read it, I took a breath and I kind of sat back in my chair and I reread it. I highlighted it in this article because I'm in disbelief that he would say that. Does he really think people are going to believe that?
I think he really believes it. I think this is part of the problem, and this is why I say the culture is not going to change. There are too many Augie Bodos in here, even secretly, or I should say privately. There are too many Augie Bodos who they look at abuse survivors as troublemakers, people who stir the pot, people who like drama, people who have bitterness in their heart, and all they're trying to do is take the church down. That's what they think. And so what's interesting about this is Augie Bodo is the one who, from what I understand, he maintained this database. I'll read just the first couple paragraphs of Rob Downon's article. Top leaders of the Southern Baptist Convention are meeting Tuesday to discuss a historic report into their handling of sexual abuses dating back to 2000. 11:25 a.m. Leaders have closed the meeting with a prayer for survivors, who they thank for their willingness to continue to stay in the fight. My question is, where were these leaders?
We're
Even in the past 12 months.
2 years ago. This has been ongoing.
Right.
Being covered up, being held secret. If I read correctly, and I know I did because I reread several times, those abuse survivors were made to feel like crap. They were treated horribly. They were left wounded worse than they were before when they tried to speak up.
Yep.
I mean, the damage that has been done is horrific. And now it's going to stir this back and make it 1,000 times worse than if they had dealt with the issues at hand when they happened.
Well, and here's why you're exactly right. And here's why I say the culture is not going to change, and they're in damage control mode right now. Rob Downon goes on, 11:10. He gives kind of a timeline in this article. 11:10 a.m. SBC President Ed Littleton said the committee needs to act swiftly in response to the Guidepost report. That's this third-party investigation, 300 pages, by the way. The SBC President Ed Littleton said the committee needs to act swiftly in response to the Guidepost report, saying that the world is watching. How about responding to the abuse allegations that have been coming their way? And this is not a secret. They had this internal database. Ed Littleton knew about it. He had to have.
Well, of course.
So now we need to act swiftly in response to the Guidepost report, not in response to people being raped.
How many, boy, my allergies, people, sorry. If somebody has like this fast cure, let me know about it. I've tried just about everything around here, ready to scream. But anyway, now I lost my train of thought thanks to my allergies. I'll think of it in a second.
It'll come
Jimmy.
to you.
Sorry.
So Ed
it's
Littleton.
Just frustrating.
Sorry, I keep saying Littleton. It's Litton, Litton. I'm tired too.
Oh, I know what I was going to say. Oh, they're worried about liability more than anything else.
Absolutely.
And it's mentioned in this article, quoted time and time and time again. They were not so concerned at all with the abuse that occurred, but the liability and the damage it would do to the surface, the face of the church, so to speak, if this came out.
Right.
And to me, man, that is so far from the gospel and so far from the truth and so far from what God wants that, it is just far, far away. And when you have this other guy saying that it's the abusers that are misdirecting everybody from God's work, no. It's all backwards and upside down. It truly is.
Well, I mean, this culture is so... It's just enmeshed in the DNA of the church that this bombshell report is not going to change the culture. It's just not. And I think Krista Brown, if anybody is skeptical, it's her. And I don't see her singing the praises of the SBC. No. If you go on Twitter and see what Krista's saying,
I peeked at
she's
some of
spot
hers.
on.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
she's saying, like, of course they're going to keep covering this up.
Right.
Like
Right.
they've been doing it since I came on scene in 2006. This database has been going on since 2000. And now all of a sudden they have a come to Jesus moment? I don't think so. So here's another quote by Ed Litton. He said, they, that is the leaders, don't need to see business as usual, or I guess that's the people. They don't need to see business as usual. We're not going to get another opportunity to do this right. Yes, you are. Wasn't Caringwell supposed to be like this? This is the time that we get it right.
This is it.
The world is watching. We heard this same thing several years ago. The world is watching us. All eyes are on the SBC and its leaders, and how we handle this matters. And it just fell flat.
It did. But you know what? I don't know, I just shake my head at stuff like this. There's this big exposure of evil. There's a big response all at once, and then we can kind of watch it dwindle back down. Have you know how things were crazy with the Catholic Church for a while? Every eye was focused on the corruption of the Catholic Church. Have you noticed that it's not like that anymore? It didn't take too long for us to quiet that down, and we hop onto something else, and then the news focuses on another institution, another church, another group. The same will happen here, and they're counting on it. They are counting on it. So let's sing our sorrows and our woes and our we're sorries right now while all eyes are focused upon us, and then go back to God is good all the time. All the time, God is good. Let's get back together and sing our praises. That's how
Yeah.
I see it.
Well, yeah. I mean, I agree. I agree with everything you said. And I mean, I think this is why we get so frustrated and why people get burned out all the time in this kind of work, because it's like, how much more embarrassment can somebody have? I picture somebody who gets hazed in the middle of a public square, and they're standing there with their pants and underwear down around their ankles, and they're beat red in the face, and they're like, my goodness, like, I will never get drunk and allow somebody to my buddies to haze me again or whatever.
Right.
And then they go right back out and do it
it
again. And I know it's not the best example, but it's like, how much more embarrassment can the SBC handle until they just go back and keep rinse and repeat? And I don't think they're ever going to change. I just don't.
I don't think as a whole the church community, whether it's the SBC, whether it's the Catholic Church, whether it's the Churches of Christ or whatever, are ever going to change to the point that we would like to see it as far as abuse is concerned. I really,
No.
really don't.
No,
I
no,
do
it won't.
not.
It can't.
Right. Yeah.
And I think there are too few people with the backbone to stand up to people like Bodo, who has this database. How many people knew about this? That's what I want to know. I didn't read this report yet, but I would love to know how many people were aware of this database of 700 abusive pastors. I mean,
this isn't 700 single abuses, by the way.
Right.
It's 700 pastors
Right.
who have committed collectively thousands.
Tens of thousands.
Yes. Of abuse.
Right.
And it's
Yeah.
like,
I mean,
it's
these.
mind-boggling to think that this was kept secret. For what?
Yeah.
For what? And in light of Jimmy, which still blows me away, they were already in the hot seat how many times?
Exactly
They had
right.
chance
That's
after
exactly
chance to
right.
come clean. And to me, when a person continues, or an institution, to hide what they know should be exposed and brought to light, that tells me they never wanted to make it right from day one,
Yeah.
because they had the opportunities time and time again.
Yeah. Yeah, here's another thing in Rob Downan's report here that he wrote this morning. 10:20 a.m. Again, this is all today. We're recording on Tuesday. 10:20 a.m. Executive committee leaders say that they will make public a private database of offenders that was maintained by Bodo. Leaders say they will do so after redacting sensitive information on survivors. They are also looking to revoke Bodo's retirement benefits, as well as others named in the report. Well, okay, so he gets his retirement pulled out from under him. Maybe they're looking into it. How about reporting him for allowing hundreds of abusers to continue to produce victims? Probably many of those who don't have their lives anymore.
I do know.
Like, how about
you and I
file criminal charges against him?
Right.
Like, look into that.
I'm still left stammering every time something like this becomes public. I'm left. I know it doesn't shock you at all because you've seen it all too many times. The pattern is there. It's clear.
Yeah.
You've said it many times. This stuff is predictable, and it is. It's predictable, and it will go on for time evermore. Maybe not in the same pattern. Now people find new ways of hiding things like this,
Yeah.
but it still shocks me when it is the leaders of churches, these people who claim to be professors of God's word, and to victimize people over and over and over again. It just blows me away. That's all. And that's exactly what this is doing. Can you imagine the raw wounds, the wounds that are going to be ripped open now when this all is exposed? How about the people, the multiple people that went and tried to get help throughout this 22-year span and were turned away, were told, they were troublemakers, they were liars, they were not believed, whatever,
Yeah.
or had to worship with these abusers? How about I keep thinking of all of those. These are individual lives that maybe a lot no longer believe in God or the church, have been, their hearts have been wounded so deeply. That matters.
Yeah.
That matters.
I know.
But they're worried instead.
I think people need to get a grasp at how big an impact this has on an individual level.
That's what I'm trying to say.
And then within the family structure, and then realize that one abuser did that. One abuser did that to that entire family, but not just that one family.
Right.
That abuser did that. The average abuser has well over 100 victims. That abuser did that to possibly up to 100 or more individuals / families, and there are 700 of these abusers that are known of and that are kept in a private database.
This is so
Think of the
right.
tens of thousands of lives that have been crushed.
I think that's so big for most people to think about that we just kind of, it's like in a war when you hear of, several thousand people being destroyed. It's too much. When it hits home is when it's a member of our family, a member of someone that then it really hits home. And I don't think it really hits until then fully. But you're right. The impact is a ripple impact. It touches the individual's family, which in turn touches the schools, the churches, the communities in which we live, which in turn touches the mental and physical health of all these people involved, which then what happens to people? They turn to drugs, alcohol, other things to numb the pain, which in turn we see a society that is tormented. And I think we're seeing a lot of results of years and years and years of suppressed abuse. Now, and we ask the question, well, what happened to people? Well, I'll tell you what happened. They lost God because of stuff like this.
Well, and they lost themselves.
They lost
because
themselves
of this.
and they lost God. Yes.
It's abuse and trauma have so many lasting generational impacts and ripple effects. And that's why we take abuse so seriously. It's like this is not.
It's not a one-time thing.
Let me back up.
At all.
What leaders tend to do is they boil this down to this theological mess of bullcrap on forgiveness and bitterness. At the end of the day, it's about getting your heart right with God and with your fellow man. And so you just need to forgive and don't harbor bitterness in your heart.
And really forget.
It's a total sham.
Right.
What's really happening is exactly what you described. And there's so many studies on this. The CDC does study. The Department of Justice does studies. They have statistics that track the financial burden on the medical field for people who've been sexually abused. I mean, we're talking hundreds of billions of dollars because of
affects,
that impact,
right.
where people are
It
addicted to
does,
drugs.
yes,
They're
yes.
numbing the pain. They're addicted
Right,
to.
right,
They have eating disorders. They have mental disorders.
right.
People struggle when their life has been full of
Depression
trauma.
is
Yeah.
debilitating.
Uh, uh,
Truly
Lost
is.
work
Yes.
because of
It
disabilities.
affects every area of our lives. Husband-wife relationships,
Broken
sibling
families.
relationships. It affects this kind of trauma affects everything. And until we get that in our heads, I don't think we'll have the right thought pattern and take actions on abuse and the abuser.
No, and I think all this just points, if anything, it kind of validates what we've been saying, is that, absent from the language of these so-called leaders, absent from their language is any of this discussion. It's all, well, in light of the report, now we better do something.
How much is this going to affect us monetarily? What's this going to do to our image, our public image? How many losses are we going to have to go through here financially? What can we do with this person and that person? What position can we reposition them in order to keep our glowing image? We need to stop thinking like that and think of exactly what we're
damage.
talking about.
Think of the carnage that's been done
Right.
and continues to be done.
This is a war that's raging, and until we look at it as such, we're not going to get it. We're just not. And you're right, the culture will not change.
Yeah.
The culture cannot change until it's understood the impact of what's happening.
Yeah. So, I mean, not to be pessimistic, but, I saw this report and I was like, well, rinse, repeat, same old, same old. Like, this is just a bigger version of what's already been coming out about the SBC.
Right.
Now we just have one more piece of the puzzle. But as far as this being like the big aha moment that's going to just tug on their heartstrings and make the leaders really repentant, it's not going to happen. It's just not. I think we're fooling ourselves if we think this is going to cause any significant change in the SBC. With that said, I'm going to put a plug in for another, again, another big day, a big week, for the docuseries that came out today called Sins of the Amish on Peacock TV. I watched both episodes. I was in both episodes, but that's not why I watched it. It is phenomenal. And
I can't wait to see it tonight.
Oh my
when
goodness,
I get
it's
home.
so good and it's so powerful.
Wait. Yes, I can't wait.
Abuse is rampant in Amish and Mennonite communities. Rampant, and all kinds of abuse: spiritual abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse. It is rampant. It is beyond a pandemic within those religious communities. And I thought this documentary did a phenomenal job.
I'm sure it did.
Laying that all out. And so, at the end of that, they closed with a quote of me talking about within these communities, what has to happen is that someone who's already inside these communities has to stand up to this crap and say enough is enough. That's how we begin to change. Not stuff like what's going on. I'm telling you guys, with the SBC, I promise you this is more smoke and mirrors. I promise you that. This is more empty promises. This is them saying, "Oh my goodness, we've been caught again, and so now's the time that we're going to change." Baloney. You had ample opportunity to make changes. What's going to change is people within these groups. When you keep private databases and when you keep when you malign survivors and treat them like total pieces of garbage, what's going to change is when somebody within that group of leaders stands up and says, "No, I am not going to stand with this. I'm not going to resign. Over my dead body am I going to resign my position. And I'm going to bring every single bit of communication to the press, and I'm going to show them what you guys are doing behind closed doors. Enough is enough. This is not going to happen on my watch." And we need people to do that.
We do. And I believe we're getting to that point, Jimmy.
I do too. For that, I'm hopeful.
10 years ago, 5 years ago, we didn't have, there wasn't enough support for someone to survive that. You know that. But now there would be enough support, I am sure of it, that if
Yeah.
a person stood up like that from the inside and said, let's do it, and set this as the charge of what they're going to do, I think there would be enough support from others within that they could do it.
Yeah.
And that, you're right, that's what it's going to take.
But they have to do it,
Yeah.
and do
Yeah.
it all the way. It can't be
Yeah.
like a half-hearted,
This
kind
is
of-
nothing more than like washing your face and redoing the makeup to make it look pretty. We need a total
Yeah.
stripping of the makeup, just a total stripping,
Yeah.
a baring of the heart, and working from point A out, from inward out.
Yeah. So, yeah, hang in there. I know
Yeah.
this is like this crazy explosive week. The dust will settle. It'll be back to business as usual, unfortunately, for a time until the next bombshell report comes out. But what's making a change is survivors who keep speaking up.
Absolutely. Yes.
Man, you guys are making
Keep
a
doing
huge
it.
difference.
Keep doing it. Yes.
So that's what's
Yes.
making change
Yep.
too.
It is.
in a
In a
positive
big
direction.
way. Yes. Yes.
So anyway, keep speaking up, because the church is being exposed for this kind of garbage, as it should.
Mm-hmm.
And that's I give all the credit to survivors. This would
Amen.
not have
Yes.
happened if it wasn't for survivors speaking up. So you guys are awesome.
Yep.
Thank you for tuning into this episode, and we'll catch you next round.
Thanks again for listening to today's episode. A special thank you to our patrons who make this podcast possible. Please help us get the word out by searching for the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast in your favorite podcast app. Be sure to hit subscribe and rate the show. Please consider supporting the podcast by becoming a patron, and check out the rewards our patrons receive.